Then I went to Africa, and there's that swift feeling of you fall in love. It's no different to falling in love with a human being, in a sense that there is the same sense of being enthralled just by who they are,
Yeah.
just by who they are. And in the Okavango Delta, where I was on foot with, I have two friends who are safari guides and who are friends with the Baye people. So we were on foot and closer to lions than I would have ever expected or ever planned or ever anything like that. But when we walked away, and our Baye guide, he's raised in the bush he knows exactly how to be around the lions. And so I watched him, and I took the rhythm, my even of breathing and being, I was looking at him, and I was taking it from him, and I was watching how he moved and where, and bringing that more into myself. And I remember going into this very deep space of quietness, so quiet that if I could have just walked through without disturbing any single, not a blade of grass or one of the sage bushes, anything, just to be so quiet that it's like you're almost not there, but at the same time you're present to it all, but you're not disturbing any of it. That was the feeling that I came away with from the lions.
I tell you, I just sitting here, Eleanor, and I can feel a sort of connection with Angie of a sort of hum
Yeah,
of resonance,
it's beautiful.
that kind of thing. Because one of the things I know that we struggle with at times being photographers is that, one, we're photographing very charismatic creatures. So, the big cat people are sort of, label is great in terms of, leveraging our message, getting a message across to people. But at the same time, we often talk about the fact of two things which are sort of understandable, but they can get in the way. And one is that because of the animals that you're watching, people somehow create you as the lion, or you as they make you much more than you are because of the charisma of the creatures you're watching. And secondly, as photographers, there are so many egos bouncing around out there, which is nothing to do with photography. And it's about getting the shot, showing off, and it can be very ugly. And I always look across, if we're not in the same car, because maybe Angie's doing stills for the videography, or she's maybe presenting in a different car to me, and I'll look across, and I always know how connected she is to what she's doing, just because there is a calmness and I can just absorb it. She'll maybe nibbling on a few nuts, having a cup of tea, and it's just this wonderful sense that she radiates of contentment, which mirrors that silence that you're talking about. And I think you'd probably describe it as being in the zone, sort of. How would you describe it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I do think there's that, the blessing of photography, the art of photography is we are so fortunate to have that as our medium to work with, because yes, I do think, for me especially, I love that feeling of, it's like a meditation.
Yes.
The noise just blends away. You're completely present with whatever it is that you're photographing. Yes, I think they do call it being in the zone. You don't hear, the world stops around you. You're just absolutely present, and you can see more deeply. You can perhaps blend with the subject that you're taking in that hum of the universe. And it's just between you and your subject, and it's a very magical place. And I do think, funny enough, that the animals, without sounding too, what would you call it, bunny huggerish. I do feel that especially the big cats that, you know, Jonathan's talking about, I think they feel it.
They sense.
They sense a sense of this car is fine to be around.
Yeah.
And they'll come and lie under your car. And
look at one time when we were filming, in fact, I think it was maybe even the first series of Big Cat Diary, 1996. And what made that series was the fact that we had a leopard, Halftail, who was instantly recognizable to people, who had a very playful cub. And Angie, you know, was working as the leopard finder with other people and stills photographer. And at one point, I had to go back to camp from a beautiful landscape called Fig Tree Ridge, where there's rocks and outcrops and giant fig trees. And Halftail was just resting up. She was, that's right, I left Angie and Halftail, not both up the tree, Angie in her vehicle, and I took off. No, you never leave this is what you always,
somebody watching, because they just blend away. So they left me to babysit Halftail. And there was no other cars around. There was, you know, the film crew had gone away, and I was just very peacefully reading my book. And I was in in those days, I had a tiny little
Rocky Daihatsu.
Yeah, Rocky Daihatsu.
Yeah, a little Suzuki
very
kind
small,
of thing.
And I had a film door that was completely open. So this side of my car is totally open. And Halftail came down from the tree, and she walked over to my vehicle, and she lay down right next. I mean, literally, I could have put my hand on her head. And she went to sleep. And occasionally she'd sort of wake up, look at me, and I would look at her, and I'd carry on reading my book. And we were very happy all day. She just lay there all day until this one came back in the evening. And Johnny came up to the car and said,
Ange, where? Because I could see she wasn't up in the tree. And I said, Ange, I don't believe it. Where's Halftail? And she just and pointed, and there she was, just. And she was one of those extraordinary creatures. And of course, people always want you to say that they're your friends and you could have touched them and that they know you. And it's difficult to tell. Do they know your energy? But what is very apparent is what Angie's been saying. There's sometimes you develop a sense, a certain feeling that makes you feel totally relaxed, and the leopard totally relaxed too.
And that is magical. I mean, I consider that still as one of, you know, it's fine. The lions are always around our cars, always sleeping, you know, in the shade of the car. But Halftail, that was a really magical moment for me. It was when I really realized that your energy does matter. I'm never one who shouts and screams in my car or gets too close, or I'm usually always that one. I will actually drive away if there's
it's ugly.
Yes, if it gets ugly, and photographers are ugly. They push and they shove and they, you know, in their little, and I can't watch it. It just hurts me so much, because I don't feel the animals deserve that.
You feel like you've disrespected them. And an interesting thing is that when I look at pictures, you know, that we've taken, or particularly in the books, and maybe favorite images, I can almost know the pictures where Angie's been on her own, because I can just feel how relaxed. Let's say, for instance, you've got members of the Marsh Pride lionesses walking towards where Angie obviously must have been with her camera in her car, and they've got cubs with them, and they are totally relaxed. And it's interesting, because we've watched these cats and other creatures for so long. Some people will say to you, "Oh, they're so relaxed, you know, they're bulletproof," sort of thing. You know, that rather unpleasant, you know, way of describing it. You know, the roof could fall in and they wouldn't even notice. They are that, and of course they have become habituated. The little cubs with mums who themselves were habituated to cars, so they can be incredibly relaxed. But what you can sense if you know them is how relaxed are they? And the difference, and Angie may say to me, sometimes she'll come back and say, you know, I don't know what was the matter with, you know, Halftail or Dada or Kabibi or Charm. Somebody must have razzed them up, or perhaps they'd had an interaction during the night with Maasai pastoralists, with cattle. There's something gone on, and there was a tension. Yes, they were still seeming to the untrained eye to be as habituated as ever, but you can tell that. And so I think the best photographs, and this is why you have to put the time in. You've got to get to know your subjects so as you become one with them, and then they just relax. Then you start to get the pictures that really other people, even who don't know the character and behavior of the animals, will probably say, what an amazing photo.
But I also think, you know, there's another element to that too, is that you know, when you have a photograph, it has that what's it called? The quantum field is within that. You know, you actually capture it there, and it's proven time and time again. If you look at a picture that was taken in a time of war, or say we're going back to wildlife, if I know pictures Jonathan and I have taken where I can think of one time when a friend of ours was bashing a tree that a leopard was in. I look at that picture and I tear it up. I can't look at it, you know, because they hold the resonance of the time. And I think that too, people don't take enough from that. You wouldn't want that picture on your wall, because it, even if you didn't know, it would actually be the resonance of that would be coming.
Yeah,
The morphic field,
Absolutely.
field, it resonates out of the photograph, and I think we should be more careful of that.
Yes, absolutely. This is, you know, that the image is opening into a deeper sense of connectivity, which is expressing, in fact, what the experience has been for, you know, for Angie, for you. And then as you go into the image, I mean, there's some of them, you know, I've got Sacred Nature here on my table next to the computer, and there is it opens into a depth of feeling, really, that is the subtle reality that, you know, you've been able to be, through the relationships and your sensitivity, that you're able to bring that into an image.
Today's world, we're rushing everywhere. And one of the things Angie always says is that being photographers has made us see much more clearly and much more in depth and in detail. It's like both of us draw. If you draw an animal, you're really going to get to know it, because you look at every nuance of the shape of the nose. Are the ears torn? How bad are the teeth worn down? Have they got many scars? I remember you mentioned a picture of Claude, of one of the lions, Claude, an amazing old lion, and again of Scarface, these incredible characters. And I think that sense of sight, and one of the things that we always do when we're sort of helping people to become aware as photographers, even though you want them also to put the camera down and look at the big view, is to start concentrating, start looking with a sense of purpose, and start looking with a clarity, and start looking for what is it, where is the picture, and what is it I want to say with it? Not, I'm just driving around and I'm going to wait for you to find the lions, and then I'll press the shutter when you found the leopard. But in the meantime, I think I'll take 20 winks or
But I think,
a suntan.
Often the picture is there. It will reveal itself to you when it's ready.
Yes.
And people are frightened to sit. They're frightened just to sit and be quiet and just observe. And it, yes, Jonathan says about drawing, and I agree with him, but I also think with photography, if you are sitting with a kingfisher, anything, all day, You're just sitting all day with that little bird or with a flower, and you're watching the light reveal itself around it, or you're watching the lions and they're mostly sleeping all day, but you're still watching. You're totally present. You're watching the breath come in and out of the lion. You're watching the nostrils. You're watching the whiskers moving. You begin to be completely intimate with the subject. And it's magic. It reveals itself, and then it's not about frantically searching for something. It will just suddenly, well, not even suddenly, it will just be there as what you want to say in that picture, or what the subject has asked you to reveal at that moment. It's an interplay, a wonderful interplay between subject and, you know, your photography.
I think also
So beautiful. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's absolutely beautiful evocation of the true artistic process. And I just have to say, I'm sorry, Jonathan, I just want to add that I spoke some weeks ago to an elder of the Unangan people, originally from the Aleutians, now moved to an island called St. Paul in the Bering Sea, one of the last to be brought up in their traditional ways. And what you have just said, Angie, resonates completely with how he was taught. You know, these young boys, they're given mentors from the age of 5 or 6. And he said the elder and the younger, they know it, they recognize each other. His mentor, over a period of like 8 or 9 years, he said, spoke very, very little. But what he was allowing him to experience and to learn was exactly that state that you've described. And when, as hunters, you know, and they are hunters, they're marine mammal hunters, and that stillness and absolute presence, he said, he realized as that when he went out with the older men, and this is as a child, and he was saying they didn't move. They were just completely still, watching for the seals, watching. And he said, and this is very difficult to do when it's cold. And when one appeared, he said, because they were in this field, he said, all of them, without anybody needing to say anything, saw where the seal was.
One of the things that came through when Angie was talking there about, you know, the little kingfisher, so many times people just, oh, there's a kingfisher, you drive by, you sit and spend time with that kingfisher. You stop taking things for granted.
Yeah.
You start to treasure them. And I think this is where this idea of sacred nature came to us. I mean, you know, people have used that term, you know, for eons, but the reason we love it in a non-religious connotation is that I know no other word which expresses so clearly the way we feel about how precious the natural world is. Not only can we not live without it, nothing can live without it, but we shouldn't be frightened of feeling in some way standing in awe, in reverence, because that denotes true gratitude. For, you know, because it is such a gift. So that's where we want to place it. You know, Eleanor, we're in Sacred Nature 2, we've broken it. So Sacred Nature 1, the book that you have, where we first started thinking about, you know, that disconnect and wanting to try to reach people, we based it around the Mara Serengeti, Africa's great savanna landscape, you know, the last great place on earth. Sacred Nature 2, we realized that we wanted, and as Angie's often said, everybody has a sacred nature. We wanted to say it's not just about big cats, it's not just about getting excited about coming on safari and charismatic animals. You can get as much pleasure in your back garden, if you have one, or stepping out into the green and marveling at a butterfly, or we saw a picture the other day sent to us by the great photographers Franz Lanting and his partner Chris Ekstrom, of a tiny little green shoot growing out of a blackened trunk of a tree in the fars. They live in California, and this not only was it a beautiful picture, but it spoke to you too. And so in Sacred Nature too, we talk about in the green, so chapter 2 is the green planet, the green world. What did we call it? I'm trying to remember what we called that. Anyway, you'll find it. But it's basically on plant life, for the love of trees. And in it, we talk about the Ndoki, the people of the Iturai forest in the Congo, which in the old days were called pygmies because they're very small. And so naturally people, shy away. Their name is the Ndoki. And the reason I mention it is that they live, to them, the Mother Earth, the womb of the world, the womb of their existence is the forest. So there's Mother Nature right there. It gave birth to them and it provides them with all of their sustenance. But the reason I mention it is they talk about silence, the silence of the forest. And it's a different silence because, of course, the forest is full of cicadas and noise and insects and buzzing and, all kinds of birds calling, whatever it is. But there is a natural silence which is different. Yeah, it's within it, and it's a spiritual. And when we read this piece of what somebody had written about it who had lived with the Ndoki, it was just so liberating, this idea in today's world of embedding yourself in that lovely song by Simon and Garfunkel, The Sound of Silence. Isn't that a wonderful thought?
Totally, absolutely. That's absolutely beautiful, what you've just described, because that silence is the one that is so full of life. It's like within that silence, you're connecting with the essence of all that is unfolding continually. It's like this holding, it's like this womb that is holding this life and allowing it to be and to breathe and to grow and to give. This is a very profound inner experience. And it is, for me, that is a deeply transformational experience, because after that, you can't exploit anymore. You can't just barge in. You can't just make noise in order to get a glance from an animal, because you're filled with this deep respect.
No.
And in that respect, there is the space for a relationship, and that is beautiful, which I think is what we're longing for, I feel.
I was going to say, imagine if we never hear the sound of silence. Imagine.
Yeah, that's insanity.
Terrifying. I would defy anybody if you took them for a walk in a forest and they were feeling bad when you took them for a walk. I would defy anybody not to leave. I mean, look at Hampton. We have part of our family have a beautiful place in England that have extraordinary forests and natural farms
and water.
And we always feel when we leave there, you're just completely renewed. They're earthy people. They love the land and they love the community, and it's quite an inspiration actually to be there. Incredible. And you feel completely renewed.
How many times do we wake in the morning and we've got a favorite bird, which is the white-browed robin chat, this liquid calling of the robin chats, and then there's a very raucous noise which we love, but it's like somebody playing out of tune, which are the Hadada ibis, which come and roost up on our trees and they fly. But this, to wake to the sound of the robin chat, and also the sound of water, which Angie was born in Alexandria in Egypt, and then at the age of 4, the family, Colonel Nasser, booted the Brits out. We had the Suez crisis, and her dad went to Tanzania, and so she was brought up in Dar es Salaam and the ocean. I tell you, photographing and Angie by the sea, you see this.
But water, there's nothing more magic than water.
The sound of water. Well, yeah, we are water. That's very well put.
Ever since I drank the water of the Okavango Delta, every time I drink a glass of water, and cool. I call it Mother Okavango, because she's the being, multiple and whole, and that is nourishing all of that life. And it really woke me in a new way to that this purity and essence of wild water, you know, water that is still natural and free and wild, and you know, and has its pulse. You know, in the case of the Delta, it's this annual pulse that brings the floodwaters. And when you drink it, your taste, this is your, you know, if you're sensitive or sensitize your awareness, when you drink water like that, it's telling you something of its story and its mystery. It's communicating with you directly.
You must have read that book, and I can't remember what his name is now, you'll have to forgive me, but a Japanese photographer who took
I've heard, I know the one you mean, that how water carries messages.
water carries messages, but he took pictures of water in different places, and the crystal shapes within the water can tell so much of whether the water is pure, whether it's full of, and I don't mean toxicity in the sense of chemicals. I mean
plastics.
Yeah, I don't mean that. I mean in the sense of if it's pure, spiritually pure water coming through a forest will look totally different than what it is coming out of a tap with chlorine in it. And the crystal, the shapes of the crystals, if it's in a forest, for instance, you must buy the book. It's utterly beautiful. The crystals within the water, these glorious shapes. And then you can see water that's taken out of a tap, maybe in London, and it's all broken and jagged. And he was trying to prove that water holds so much. Well, of course it does. I mean, sometimes we need people to show us before we believe something that's so obvious. I do think perhaps also as you get older, very naturally people's sensitivity becomes deeper. So regardless of what is happening on the planet, you somehow sink deeper and deeper and be able to feel at a different level than when you were maybe in your 20s and 30s. So I mean, obviously the last, whatever, 2-3 years have been hugely dramatic for somebody as sensitive as myself to what's going on in the world.
Yes. Well, you said in the video for Sacred Nature that what you're bringing is your life's work. You know, it's that this is, and it comes, you know, your life's work is a gift. It's a gift to be shared. And so it's a vision and a deep inner experience of this precious quality within the natural world and within ourselves.
There is a passion, Eleanor, between John and I, to want to show the little ones, the next generation, because they're our hope. And what we've seen is many of the little ones are not connected because there's too many of them, and the parents are struggling so much. So often they don't take time to take their children into the woods, or I mean, here we are very lucky in Kenya because most people do, but I think on a global stage, you know, the poverty that we see, and the little ones are so caught up in just survival now. But unless we actually somehow manage to unify enough people to the message that we're trying to, and it's such a simple message. There's nothing hard about what we're trying to say, just to reconnect people to nature, to the planet, then we have a chance. But without education, without teaching people, because people think it's, you know, it's too difficult. It's, you know, we've got lives to lead, but it's not actually too difficult. But it's so necessary.
But I think passion. I think that point gets right to the heart of it, which is, what does it say about our world where we've become so unaligned from the importance of nature that we at times dismiss environmentalism climate change, worrying about the planet, as if, yeah, but we don't have time for that. We're too busy, just got to get by. Well, in the meantime, we're sliding down this very steep slope towards a hellish existence. And the pandemic has just been the tip of the iceberg in showing us what could be in store for us if we don't wake up and listen to the energy of the planet. Because I think the way we've been talking with you and this resonance about, you know, the Gaia philosophy, the idea of this pulsating, living entity, you know, of life on Earth, it's screaming at us. It's been quite gentle for a while. And then, you know, icebergs collapsing, glaciers melting, forest fires, everybody's scratching their heads and saying, oh my goodness, didn't it used to be like this when we were kids? We knew when the rains were coming.
But also, what a bigger message about, you know, what a bigger message could we have had than COVID?
No, absolutely,
because,
yeah.
You know, you can't just keep taking animals, wild animals, and abusing them and doing the things that people have been doing to them, and not expecting some kind of crack in the matrix.
Yeah, we're rupturing the system.
And you're just thinking, well, if this doesn't get you to sit up and wake up, that nature cannot be abused like we're abusing, I don't know what else could be. I mean, you can see icebergs and it seems so far away, but COVID, that's right here.
Close. Yeah.
I'm still waiting for people to kind of make that connection. You do read about it sometimes, but you're just saying, well, you know, perhaps if you would just respect, you know, the wildlife, we could live in harmony with nature.
And that's why in Sacred Nature 1, we saw the Mara Serengeti as this wonderful example of how it used to be and how it could be, and that when nature is left to juggle the balls, to sort of, you know, create the balance in natural ecosystems, nature does it, because if you eat too much, then there's not going to be enough room for your offspring. There's not going to be enough food. So if you inundate the pasture, you know, if there's too many of you, nature will actually, the food supply will force your population to come back down into some kind of balance. And the balance between the predators and prey, you know, it's a dynamic process. And we used to be part of that. You know, so the nomadic pastoralists, the Maasai, and before the Maasai, thousands of years before the Maasai came into the Mara Serengeti, there were people there living with small-scale agriculture, nomadic, moving, just like the wildebeest did. And it worked because there was a natural ebb and flow, there was a natural balance. And if you push too hard in this way, nature pushed back. And then we came along. And then we started agriculture and all the things that led through to civilization, the Industrial Revolution, and suddenly a cash-driven economy and growth. And the natural environment basically then just became, thinking and worrying about it became not only an inconvenience, but the people running the businesses didn't want to hear about the fact that, oh, but these resources are not renewable. You know, if you use up all the oil, you better have a plan B if you want to carry on life as you used to. And hence we've got the problem that we have. But the fact is, nature is the guiding light, which is checks and balances. And that's how we used to live. We didn't push our luck. And if we did, we paid the price. It can seem, but how can we fix the climate? How can we fix things that, you know, it's just impossible. So we'll just sit and get on with it, have an ice cream. But there was this movie recently, and it was narrated by, what's the guy's name? He was in the White Men Can't Jump.
No. Was it Feed the Earth?
Yeah, and it was called Feed the Earth, but it was about soil.
Yeah.
Something about the earth. Anyway, if you Google the guy, Woody Harrelson.
Oh, yes. Yeah, he's great. Yeah.
Google Woody Harrelson and watch that. I think it's a Netflix, is it? Special.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the things that I loved, and Angie is a passionate gardener. She loves to see things grow. I just take it for granted, but and it's wonderful to watch her. It's again, Angie at her happiest. But in this movie, I love just once or twice where somebody literally put their hands into rich soil and just lifted it up and let it
and smell it
and smelt it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, we can turn things around by actually soil management, by better practices. It's possible. So we are definitely not, you know, some people come to Africa, and we've seen some authors who maybe were here for a certain period of time or even born here, and after a while they leave and then they write these bits about the end of the game. Well, I don't want to hear that.
No.
I don't want to hear that, because actually that's just almost so self-satisfied. I saw it, sorry, but you probably won't. It's not just a wake-up call. There's a huge other entity there. And what we say is, as we mentioned to you, and you gave a little tick, better to light a candle,
yes,
than to curse the darkness. And people say Eleanor Roosevelt is the originator of that. But what a wonderful, you know, even at the darkest moment, in the greatest despair, if you only hang, and of course sometimes you can't, you just give up. But we you know, we've said in this last part of our life that not only have we been incredibly blessed to see and experience the things we've done, to be able to create imagery and share it with people, but now we need to make a difference. Everybody needs to make a difference, and this is our way of doing that.
We have the next generation. We have within our family.
You know, yes, I was going to say our grandchildren, but also our son, who designed the book.
Working with David and Troy,
and his fiance,
has been the greatest gift that you could offer people like Jonathan and I, because otherwise you're knowing this journey is coming to an end for us, but we're able to leave a legacy to the next generation, and they're as passionate, if not more, with far greater energy than we have. And then we've got the next little ones. We've got a grandson who is so involved. I mean, you only have to get Michael, you know, he watched one of the Big Cat Tales in which I had said something about, I can't even remember what I said, but he came for tea and he said, Granny, you said that, and he picked it up like that, and he said, we have to do this, you know, now is the time. And I thought, it's so, you know, they're like sponges, they're right there, they would do anything, and they have the passion to take it forward. It's just that they need the guidance, and that's where John come. Already we're starting a children's book of sacred nature. One for very little people, the ABC of sacred nature, and then something a little bit more of our grandson's age, because to give them the principles of the Sacred Nature Initiative, because otherwise it's a little bit too distant for them, but something that we can put into schools, something, you know, that kids can get involved in, and you know, they can embrace it, and they're friends, and they'll make it a little movement, hopefully, in their school. And I don't think it's too much to ask for.
No, and I mean, let's face it, it's happening. I mean, you've got Greta Thunberg, obviously, but all around her, and even children of, I mean, one of the things about social media, which is interesting and positive, is that you get a sudden wake-up call, as I have, where suddenly you tap into a particular age group of voices, and there are these wonderfully articulate youngsters who are so knowledgeable and so informed and so proactive, and who are getting out there and sharing information and being, you know, real activists. They're really saying, wake up, and they push back. And you know, as we know, the leadership of the world is no longer able to pat them or us on the head. Bunny huggers, greenies. I mean, look at what a sort of a derogatory label it used to be not so long ago, to be considered green. You were inconsequential. You needed to grow up and stop being a Girl Guide or a Boy Scout and get a job. There was this incredible dismissiveness. Now, God help anybody who tries to really push against the tide of environmentalism, because politically it will count against them, as we've seen with some of the biggest ones. It's funny, when you were talking there, I suddenly had this thought that there should be something, and I don't know quite what it would look like, but almost like reaffirming one's marriage vows, just a ritual. But the vows would be to nature.
Great.
The old sort of harvest festivals, and I mean, and again, there's a religiosity, creeping into it, perhaps because you start thinking, well, that's the kind of thing you'd do in a church or whatever it is, but without it seeming too, I don't know, how would some people say, woo woo, but there should almost be a rite of passage, a new kind of ritual that should be embedded, maybe that's what it is. It needs to be in schools, in just part of the curriculum, but going back out into the woods, because you probably heard of the book Last Child in the Woods.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
So that whole idea that our generation, or our son's generation, their children will have been the last childs in the woods, because people just are not doing it anymore. They're either too busy on their devices, at home, in their bedrooms. They don't roam, away from adults in the way that they used to. And getting back out into the woods, and of course that's what used to happen with the hunter-gatherers. You would be out there learning how to collect honey and how to hunt, and they'd probably smear a bit of the blood of the animal that you just killed, and there'd be a ritual and a prayer to the god of the animals. It's Joseph Campbell, isn't it? We have to recreate myths for today around nature. What we're both doing, what all of us are doing, is the point that you raised, and it's something that I've just been reading a book about it, which is that storytelling is at the heart of humanity.
Exactly.
All of us are storytellers. We just have to realize what is the story. And obviously, for different reasons, some people, the story is about growing their business, but the stories that really resonate are ones which are honest and which are told with passion. And you can build in all kinds of elements into your story to grab people's attention. But I think it's one of the reasons why the stories that we tell around the big cats are honest.
Oh yeah.
They are how we really feel at that moment in time, when the mother is trying to save her cubs from, there's a big male lion coming, and he's maybe, all of that. I think that's the empathy, that's the resonance that everybody relates to, is these wonderful stories and the connection to nature.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you both so much. It's been a joy.
Been our pleasure. It's been wonderful.